to today's lecture. As you already know, we have test documentation and defect reporting for today, and we're going to start once again with a little warm-up, which I think you're familiar with the page. So I'm just going to share my screen briefly. You will be able to see the lecture. However, I'm just going to use this page. So we have here the instructions, which I'm going to paste right now in the live chat as well. So what is the idea for the brief exercise? You'll be divided into basically groups in which you can choose somebody who you want to share their screen and just go through some scenarios that you, of course, decide on. The idea of the exercise is to find bugs, and then you document them. You can do at most 3, you can do 2 or 1 bigger bug, so however you decide. The idea is just to detect some of the issues. I think you're already familiar with the page we're going to use, so I think you more or less know some of the buggy scenarios as well. The point is, when you find the issues, try to document them. And when I say document, I don't expect for you to have, let's call it quote unquote, a correct approach, but rather to see your thought process. So you can document them however you wish. So if you want to write a checklist of steps you did, or you want to enumerate what you did, or just write like we did with the test cases, which thing that you did at that moment, or you just want to write a simple description, this is the issue and that is that, it's completely fine. The point is to note down any issues that you notice as a group and that you think you would want to share later on. If you note more than 3, that's also amazing. You can share all of them. But more or less, that will be the idea in the groups, and then we'll have some time to basically share together in this call what were your findings and what were the issues that you came across. Is it clear? Do you have any questions maybe? Okay, I pasted the instructions once again in the chat. So yeah, Jumana, we can do the breakout groups now, and yeah, thanks.
Okay, so the breakout rooms are open. Folks, you know the drill. Please make sure that you're initiating also the conversation. Best of luck. Andrew, you told me you need around 10 minutes for this.
Yeah, I think 10 is enough. Just bugs, I think there are plenty. They should be able to find at least
Okay.
1 or 2 fast. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome.
I will go to the, I think, fourth one. Let's go.
Okay.
So, right.
You can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. First of all, great job, everyone. I went through some of the groups and I saw you had a lot more than 3 issues that you discovered, which is excellent. So for the next bit, I would like to ask you all to share some of the findings that you had. So you don't have to share all 15 bugs, but show us what you documented, what issues did you find in the live chat. And I'm going to share that screen right now so we can see how did you note down the issues that you saw, what issues did you saw, and so on and so forth. So you can start entering the your findings in the live chat. Share my screen in the meantime. Just put this here. There we go. All right, just open the chat. Okay, I already see Francesco wrote down. So we have here, in a way, a checklist. So we say, go to the website, click on view top all to see more items at a time on the page. Website crashes, expected result, show more or less number of items. We have then another one, go to homepage, click on item flamingo shirt, try to change currency on the select currency box. website crashes, expected results should change currency and adjust price accordingly. So we see one approach here is just writing in a way a list of all the steps that need to be taken for the separate issues, and at the end providing an expected result, so what we need to see in regards to what is actually happening within the steps. So that's a very nice approach. I love it. Well done for that. Then we have from Theodora, we have go to the Academy, choose a Academy bugs page, choose a product and click on it. Product descriptions are not in English. Then we have add to product to cart, go to cart. Grand total is wrong. So again, we have in a way a notation of steps, all leading to some kind of result which is not expected. In the previous example, we saw expected result in a separate column. Here we see it within the steps. Again, nothing wrong. So this is just noting down the issues from the page. Then we have from Valentina. We have enumerated steps here. We can see Open Academy bugs. Click the Find Bugs link on the navigator bar. Open product. Open the cart at the bottom of the right side menu. Click the cart if there are any items. So here we see a different approach again. We see expected result. The caption of the return to store button is written with even spacing between letters. And then we see the actual result. There is too much space before the last letter in return to store. So we see the approach is applied to multiple of these issues. So this is also a very neat way of providing documentation. So very nice job. We have steps, we have what we expect to happen and what actually happens separated from the steps. Another neat approach. Okay. All right, I don't see anybody else typing, so I think if somebody else adds something, I can read it while we're going through the first bit of the materials. But for now, very, very well done to all of you. I'm just going to move the live chat here. Very well done to everyone. I actually very much am happy to see you all just engaging in this activity and doing so much work, finding so many issues, and then documenting them in your own approach. And the idea with the exercise is also to see ways in which we can actually document in a way our testing process and issues. So we saw some different approaches with this exercise, and that's what we will also see here in the before we begin section. So we have two types of reports, and they are related to the same bug. So one is more or less writing in a way, let's say descriptive text. So to provide what happened, and then the latter one has a table with multiple columns. So now I'm briefly going to skim through the two scenarios. So let's see report A. We have three noted issues. So you see the login button is not functioning. User should be logged into the system. Nothing happens when the login button is clicked. John Doe. Currency conversion is incorrect. The total should be converted to the select currency. The total amount remains in the original currency by Jane Smith. The image is not landing on the product page. The image of the product should load. The image placeholder is displayed instead of the actual product image by Alice Johnson. So this is one approach. Now, bear with me. I'm just going to skim through the second one, and then I'll have a question for all of you. So in report B, we have first of all some structure. So we have a table, we have columns like bug ID, summary, steps to reproduce expected result. So let's see the same tests again. So for the first one, the login button is not functioning. The steps are navigate to the login page. The expected result is that the user should be logged into the system, and the actual result is that nothing happens when the button is clicked. So we see here additional fields like critical, severity critical, priority high, reported by John Doe. So we see different aspects. I'm going to just close this, and information added here like the date and then the environment, which is Windows 10. Moving on, we have currency conversion is incorrect for the second bug. Then we have what are the steps basically, add the product to the shopping cart. The total should be converted to the selected currency is the expected result, and the total remains in the original currency is the actual result. Again, we have what is the severity, major, priority, medium, reported by Jane Smith, date, and then we have the environment. Now, my question for you all is to think about this. Which of these two let's say, approaches, so report A and report B. Um, which of those do you think is, let's say, the more simplified or the one that you understand more? So which one gave you, in a way, more information? And do you think that one of them, okay, B, and do you think that, also I would ask you to think, do you think that both are relevant or only one of them as well? I see most of you are going for B. I see more people typing. I'll wait, just be sure. Report B is surely more complete and fast, easy to read. Okay, it's very nice. I see also Inas wrote, B captures everything that is needed. Yep. All right. Good. All right. I see the majority is going for B. And yes, you are correct. So definitely B gives us a lot more detail and a lot more explanation and a lot more information as to what is happening, where it's happening, who discovered it, what's the environment, summary steps. So we have basically everything we need here. Not that A does not have some of these fields. We definitely have some information provided. However, it's not so well structured. Now, I want you to all remember from this, it's very important, especially when you do any kind of documentation and bug reporting, you must have some kind of structure. So you must have some way in which you will provide the information that you discovered that is easy to read and understand for both you, the remainder of the development team, and the stakeholders. So that's something that we always have to keep in mind. However, I would stress something in specific scenarios. So let's say you're running low on time, you need to do as much coverage as possible. And when you find issues, you maybe don't have the, let's say, luxury to do such a detailed report. It is okay to provide, let's say, a report similar to this one under A. So not exactly as the one that we have here. Obviously, we would need to add some steps and whatnot to make it a bit more detailed, but it's okay to sometimes have descriptive issues and documentations when time is running short. So the idea is to make sure everything works and then to make sure that we get the information that something is not working in the fastest way possible with as much detail. And usually this approach can be taken, but it's not ideal. And also see that Susan wrote both are relevant. Report A is good for a quick scan and can always be put into report B format. That's great. That's actually wonderful. That's what the point that I'm also trying to make. So again, it depends on the time constraints that you're facing. Again, when you have time, when you can do this in your own accord, definitely B is the option. But A is not incorrect. It doesn't mean this is a terrible report. Never do this. So the idea is to kind of understand that you can have various ways of reporting. The key bits being you need to have a clear and concise information and make sure that it's detailed enough, depending on the time, of course. That is also something that we will be tackling in today's lecture. So we will see how we can practice proper documentation in general of the testing process, and as well of what is the process of identifying, retesting, fixing, and documenting issues. So that is the idea today, and we will mention some of these more detailed approaches as we go on into the lecture. So I'm just gonna move now to the first bit that we have, which is the foundations of test documentation and planning. So it's one thing to remember that when you work as testers, you will have a lot of documentation to do, a lot of planning as well. We already touched a bit on that, but definitely a lot of documentation. Either if you work in a waterfall model, so you just test at the end, or in a Scrum model where you work on multiple iterations throughout the life cycle, you will definitely have a lot of documenting to do. Hence, knowing some of the importance and tips and tricks and as well strategies is key. So when talking about documentation, we need to highlight why it is important. Although it could be, and most of the time is, a bit of a hassle to do the documentation, especially when you've done it multiple times. It plays a very big part in the overall development lifecycle. And why is that? One of the points is clarity and communication. So if you have a very well structured documentation with enough detail, everybody will be able to understand what they need to do, how they need to do it, so what needs to be checked, when, what environment, so on and so forth. So with the good documentation, you will be able to avoid misunderstandings. Then we have consistency and repeatability. So if you have very well documented, especially test cases, you could actually make them in future scenarios. So you don't necessarily only use them once and be done with them. You actually make sure that you, in a way, decrease your future time when you will need to add the same test cases again, making sure that you would have more time to maybe draft up new ones or have a better coverage. Then we have traceability and accountability. So once you have everything in place in the documentation, it basically creates a linkage between all of the corresponding elements. So test cases, defects, user stories, you basically have a better mapping when you have such documentation. Now, one of the most important parts, I would say, is training and onboarding. It's very important to note, and I would like you to take this away from this lecture as well as a key point, training and onboarding. In many projects, it's actually, I would say, uh, the onboarding can be very well done by a tester. And I believe it should be practiced by a tester. Why? Again, as I mentioned, we do most of the documentation and we usually have a wider overview than the developers. So we don't only work on a single feature, we try to break it. We work on multiple different aspects of it. We test it in correlation to other features from other developers. So having this documentation is key for us to be able to train and onboard new colleagues in an easier manner and give them a better insight of the application. So remember, having good documentation can support you in providing more to the team by preparing newcomers, even in the development sphere, which is something that we have practiced at my workplace quite often. Finally, continuous improvement. If you have good documentation, you will be able to take away in a way, lessons learned and see what things could be improved for future iterations. Now, why? What I want to stress here now is the test principles. To have effective documentation and planning is key to understand these principles. Now, regarding these principles, they are very important, especially for testers and for the ISTQB syllable. So you will definitely need to learn some of these things by heart because this is a common question. There are common questions in regards to the principles. However, they're quite easy to understand because they are all practiced somehow in documentation and planning. So what are the principles basically? The first one is the tests show the presence of defects, not their absence. So when you test, you can reveal defects, but you do not prove that there's no bug within the ticket. So that's very important to remember. So we test to reveal defects, not to confirm everything's good. Exhaustive testing is impossible. So this comes as a no surprise. So you cannot really test every possible input output condition that you can think of. And the idea is that you focus on the ones that are basically more important or the more riskier aspects. So again, you can't test everything. Early testing saves time and money. We've mentioned this previously with the shift left approach. So if you find defects early in the development lifecycle, if you start testing as early as possible, you save time and reduce costs. Defect clustering. So usually defects are found within a small number of modules, meaning they're not found across, let's say, 9 out of 10, which would mean that something is definitely not how it's supposed to be working. So you would focus your testing more on these critical areas. Then we have the pesticide paradox. This can also be, you can remember it as deprecating test scenarios. And why do I say that? If you always do the same tests repeatedly for even for different features that are similar to the ones before, you will eventually not be able to find new defects. And that should come as no surprise because you're not changing essentially everything and you're always doing the same scenarios. And it's important to avoid this in a way that you review and revise test cases, scenarios, so whatever documentation you have, so to make sure that you always have new test cases or modify the existing to adapt to changes and of course find defects. If testing is context dependent, so different software requires different testing approaches. Depending on the project, client's needs, you will tailor your approach. Absence of error fallacy. So even if software is free of defects, it may not meet user needs. So this basically states that you don't only test functionalities or things that you think are connected to the components and the system itself. You have to make sure that user value is incorporated. It is covered with acceptance testing, but we should also practice this when doing our testing coverage. So that is basically the idea of these principles, and we will see how they actually tie into the planning and documentation with this next point. So for example, prioritizing tests, very important. And what you can do, you can use defect clustering, exhaustive testing principles to focus on critical areas. You've already done exhaustive exploratory testing, which kind of does a lot of coverage. And the idea of prioritizing is when you do such a thing, you might notice which modules would be the ones that contain all the bugs. So what you do, you know that those areas are critical. You know that you cannot test everything else all that done at the same time. So you make sure to prioritize these, let's say, these components where the most critical issues can arise. Risk-based testing. So early testing and context dependency help identify high-risk areas to prioritize in test plan. So, of course, when you have early testing, so you discover as much issues as possible, you also find some risks that you might not come across when you do only the dynamic testing. So, therefore, it's key to practice both. Continuous improvement. So pesticide paradox, you apply it. So simply modify, update, add new test cases. Don't only reuse the same ones over and over again. And user-centric testing. So you want to validate functionality and user requirements. Again, another principle that ties into this. And we see in a way that you can apply all of them in test planning and documentation. I would say that you don't need to, how do I put it, remember them by heart for when you work on projects. So definitely not something that we as testers usually do when we're going through these phases. However, it's good to know to have them in a way to understand these principles because they will provide good support when you find yourself in a situation, whether you are in an early planning phase, in an early exploratory testing phase. So you could apply them to support your planning, your documentation, the overall process. Do you have any questions regarding this first page? Okay, I see no questions. So we have a small exercise here. We have a question, which is exhaustive testing of all possible inputs, conditions, and paths is feasible in most projects. You can write true or false in the chat for which option you believe to be correct. See false, false, okay. I see multiple people going for false. I'm gonna wait a few more seconds. All right. Yeah, so most of you went with false, and that would be the correct answer. So it is false. We mentioned exhaustive testing is impossible. So that it is not context dependent. It is actually always a fact. You can test everything. So very well done, everyone. Okay, let's move on to the next page, which is test planning and activities. Now, we already touched a bit about test planning. So the previous lecture, we learned about planning, about test management. And part of the documentation is also the planning process. So when you have this plan, it also counts towards the documentation. So this is more of, let's say, trying to remember the past contents that we went through. So essentially, the plan is the guide for the entire test process. And what did we mention when we wanted to create one? Well, we said that we need to have a scope and objectives. So we need to know what is the project scope, so what we will be covering, what do we expect as an outcome. So basically setting scope and the test objectives. Then we define deliverables and the strategy. So identifying both what are the deliverables, so test cases, scripts, reports, documentations, so on and so forth. And then we, based on those, create a strategy, which we will later implement. The strategy doesn't only focus in a way on just the types of testing, also how the reporting, communication will go. So basically covering the entire process. Then we have resource allocation and environment setup. So making sure we know what are the roles for each person taking part in the testing process, as well as setting the environment in which we will be doing the testing. Of course, trying to mimic the production environment as close as possible so that the results that we get are as close to the real thing as there could be. Then we have developing test cases and execution plan. So basically, once everything is set up, tests are executed, and we should be able to kind of have an idea or plan out the execution schedule, what are the timelines and milestones, so that we know what is expected to happen when during the execution. And finally, establishing metrics and finalizing the plan. So making sure to note down which metrics will show us if everything was successful or if it failed, which metrics should we keep as most critical, and of course finalize all the data for the test plan. So this is just basically going a bit through what we already mentioned previously. Now, um, now we already went through let's say what was part of the testing plan. Now what I want to stress in this section here is how do we tie everything from the test plan to the documentation and uh, the let's say the defect management process. So once we have a test plan, the test plan itself is in a way part of the documentation, as I mentioned before. So it has these activities that we have taken part of and make sure that after we're finished, we recheck what we have done, what we have not done, and we can use it to improve later on. So some of the main points that we can see here are the test design and environment setup, test execution, defect management, and reporting and closure. So all of these contain valuable information for our overall testing documentation. Within the test design environment setup, so we have creating test condition, cases, and setting up the environment. So everything that we put as information within this part, so all of this data would then be transferred to both our plan and to the overall documentation of the project. For the execution and management, we obviously would have the tests that have been run. We would have some logs, so we will have results from their execution, as well as the issues that we have found, that we have documented, building both of those within the main documentation that we're planning to provide. And finally, reporting and closure. So generating reports that basically summarize all of the activities that have taken part and providing the metrics both from the defect side, from the testing side, and having a sort of summary for the stakeholders as well as for us moving onward, again, as mentioned, to make sure to have some kind of let's say structure which we can reuse to improve future testing processes. So all of these combined do play a part within both the test plan and in the overall test documentation with all their separate parts that basically make up those sections. This was more a reminder page. So does anybody have any questions still lingering related to some of these facts? Okay. If not, I'll move on to test strategy, scenarios, and documentation. Now, we mentioned that documentation plays a crucial role not only for the team and stakeholders, but for continuous improvement. So we need to understand what are the different types and the purposes of those different types of documentation when trying to, let's say, create one. So we see here multiple types of documentation. As I mentioned, test plan, test cases, they all technically far part in, can be found within test plans as well. So test cases. In addition to those, we also have test scripts, test reports, and traceability matrices. So what do they do? We already know that the test plan gives us what is the overall testing strategy. Test cases give us detailed step-by-step instructions for how to execute scenarios. Test scripts basically execute those cases and then in a way showcase what was done during the execution. So if you open up the logs, you will see what were the results based on their execution. Then we have the reports, which show us a summary of all the results. And then finally, the traceability matrix, which maps the test cases to requirements. It could also map entire tickets to other tickets. So this is, we'll talk a bit more detail later in the lecture, but it basically provides us a way to trace back on the tasks that have been done. Now, what is important to understand here is the difference between test scenarios and cases. Often when, especially when beginning within the testing field, people can get these two terms confused. So what is a test scenario and a test case? Well, we use both for documentation and linkage for later on for defects that can occur. There is a main difference. Now, I see here in the chat that Valentina wrote no activity. I find it tricky. I do have an activity and it's right now. Based on what we have done up until this point. So we managed to create test cases, especially plenty of them in the previous lecture. My question to you all is, you can write it shortly, however you wish, in the live chat. What is your understanding? What is a test case and what is a test scenario? Do you have any ideas? So no wrong answers. This is just to see how you're feeling about both of these, let's say, definitions. I see multiple people are typing in the chat, so let's see what will the answers be. So test case versus test scenario. Again, you don't need to write two big definitions. Okay, I see an answer already from Susan. Testing scenarios describe the overall situation. Okay, requirements, etc. Test cases give detailed guides what to exactly do. Wonderful. And Jordan wrote, test case is detailed step by step with specific focus, and then a scenario is more of a high-level description of what needs to be tested. Great. He also wrote, a test scenario could be testing a function such as login, while test case is the steps you take. Great, with a practical example. I love that. Very well done. I see other people are typing as well. Yeah, in the interest of time, I'm just gonna move to it. You are correct. So all of you that you wrote the answers, as we'll see, Francesco wrote a scenario detail, but general description of what is need to be tested, cases, detailed step-by-step instructions. So I can see more or less you're all already getting the hang of it, which is wonderful. Glad for that. You are correct. So the test scenario, high-level description tells us what we need to test. If you remember the test rail labs, the test scenario is basically the title that we gave to what we were doing with the test cases. So you can remember it if it also helps like that. And then the test cases are the step-by-step instructions for what needs to be done within that scenario. So wonderful. Really happy that you're all going into it. So that is the main difference. So you have a broad overview with the test scenario, and then with the test cases, you have the details of what actually needs to be done so that you can You can execute everything that is required from either the requirements, user story, depending on what you have got in your hands. Now, we understand what a scenario and test case is. Now, what are the steps to create test cases and test scenarios to the best of our abilities? For test scenarios, we need to understand requirements. So meaning when we get the requirements, usually you would have this ticket or user story, we call it, where you have, it's called the Gherkin methodology. So it has a few steps given the user is doing something, when the user does something else, then they should see this result. And then you analyze and then you make sure that every detail is captured from that requirement. And once you do that, you brainstorm scenarios. So you make sure to collaborate with the team, not only the testing team, you can also go with the development team. And you try to think of positive and negative scenarios regarding the requirements. So what is, let's say if there is a login, you would want to try valid and invalid credentials. Finally, prioritize scenarios. So focus on critical high impact functionalities. So you want to first cover the, let's say we call them main scenarios, the ones that are most critical and the ones with the highest priority. And then you kind of go down the ladder. In a way, if you remember when we were talking about integration testing, there was this bottom up approach. This is what you want to do. You want to start from the core and then build up based on criticality. Now, regarding to the test cases, what you want to do for the test case creation, first you want to define an objective. So what does the test case do? And what does it do in the scenario? So you want to have an idea of what this test case does. If you do not have that, you can easily sometimes combine multiple test cases within one, which is not ideal because you're not really showing the different, let's say, scenarios as clearly as possible, and the wording can sometimes be confusing. So having a clear objective is key. Then detail steps. We already mentioned it in this. You want the steps to be as detailed as possible. In a way, try to aim to make them as understandable so that even a user who has no idea of how the application works can understand what you wanted to do. So that is, when you've done that, then you know that the test step is detailed. Specify expected results. So of course, right, what do you expect to happen when all the steps are done? And then review and refine. Again, this is usually done with the entire team, developers, proxy product owner, scrum master. So you get a better overview and you basically make sure that your coverage as well as test cases are relevant. Now, those are the steps, let's say, to create both of these, whereas here are some best practices we can do for test documentation. Clear and concise, as I mentioned, so you want even people who are not aware of what you're doing to understand what is happening. Make sure that it's up to date. One thing that often happens with documentation is not updating it. So you will most likely come across on projects where you will read something that has not been updated for 2 years and you're still expected to use it. So make sure that everything is up to date. Comprehensive, so everything is covered, even edge cases and potential failure points. We want to make sure that we have everything rounded up and not leave out anything that we might have not noted. Consistent, so one thing to keep note for documentation, so this includes test cases, scenarios, plans. You want to have standardized templates. So having these templates is better also when you provide them to stakeholders. They will also have a better understanding of all the terminologies that they use within them. So having templates is a must. Usually when you go into a project where everything is already set up, you would have these templates, but you could give your own input and also improve them. Accessible. Ensure all team members can access the document and basically provide like here is the central repository. This is usually handled with applications like Confluence, which works together with Jira. So you want to have it somewhere where everyone can go and read it because it is not only the testing team that needs it. Regarding of the management of these documentations, you can use Jira, TestRail, Qtest, Azure DevOps test plans. So we already talked a bit about this, and we will be working with Jira today, so stay tuned for that. But again, this is usually done using such tools on most projects. You're not going to do this documentation in, let's say, Excels and Words all the time. You will have some kind of management system. Do we have any questions so far? Okay, I don't see anything so far, so I'm just going to move to the traceability matrix part, matrix part. So what is the traceability matrix? I already mentioned this briefly before. It is a sort of test management that makes sure that requirements are covered by test cases and they are all mapped together. So it's not basically not only requirements and test cases, but requirements and acceptance testing tickets. Also, it could be issues with test cases, issues with tickets. So it's basically a way to trace back from one ticket to another or to the root ticket from which everything started. So why is it important? Well, you ensure comprehensive coverage, meaning that everything is tested. So once you have your test cases linked to requirements, you know that you will definitely have it covered since you will make a test case regarding the requirement. And it could also support finding missing test cases or even missing requirements. So it works vice versa. You could link it to a part where a requirement needs to be modified or added, and you might notice that it has not been done yet. So this is also covered. It facilitates impact analysis. So it helps you understand how big is the impact of changes. So in regards to the test cases, since you will have them in a way linked and observed at the same time, it improves accountability. So again, provides a clear mapping between requirements and test cases and more or less improves the overall accountability in the process. It aids test management. So this is very important because it supports it basically shows you where the test progress. So how many requirements have you covered? How many functionalities have you covered? You basically see once you execute the test cases, which are maybe pending, which ones are failed, which are still in to do. So you basically have an idea of where the testing is at the moment just by having this traceability. Now, how to create it, it's actually quite simple. The term sometimes can be a bit difficult when you look at it, traceability matrix, but it's a lot simpler than you think. So basically, you list requirements. So this is usually this is usually done when you don't have some management tool that can support you. This is let's say we call it in my place like walkthrough. So you list the requirements. You generate a list of all requirements from some kind of documentation that you would get. Then you list test cases. So you see all the test cases that you did for all those requirements, and then you map them accordingly. So you create a table with requirements and rows, test cases and columns, and then you kind of like connect them all. So we see requirement 1, user login functionality. Requirement 1 is basically covered with 3 test cases. You see, we have login with valid credentials, invalid, and test password recovery. So basically, these 3 can map to the first requirement. For requirement 2, we can do test case 4, which is test profile update with valid data. And once again, we can do test case 5, which is test profile update with invalid data. So it's essentially just making sure that the requirements and test cases are all interconnected. One thing I would note here is this is usually done by the test management or project management platform. So you can actually link everything there. You would not need to go on a project and manually like try to connect the dots between requirements and test cases. This is not practiced maybe at all at these times, especially when you have so much, let's say, advancements in these fields. Now, why you can use the traceability metric verification. So you can make sure that all requirements are covered by test cases. We already mentioned impact analysis, so be able to understand how big is the impact if a requirement is changed, removed, or even a new one is added within the same user story. So basically we'll be able to estimate that and then track the progress, how far is the testing at the given moment, even the development as well. So again, traceability is very important in most modern projects. You don't really do it by hand. You have project management tools that support traceability. So you have separate sections where you can link your test cases to requirements, to entire tickets. You can also link issues, so tickets that are related to defects that you've discovered. And you should practice this as often as possible because, again, it does not only help you with the overall testing and remembering in a way what you need to cover, but it also supports developers so they can always track back from some issues to see what test case it failed when you reported it and what requirement is that or functionality related to. Do you have any questions? I see, is there a downloadable traceability matrix template document? Yes, okay, I see already Seraphim answered this. That's great. I see another from Valentina. Seraphim also answered that. That's great. Yeah, I want to add to that. You can, again, the idea of the traceability matrix is focus more on the fact of traceability. So you want to be able, let's say, I'll give an example. You have a issue that happened on production and you were testing a feature that went on production just recently. If you don't have the user story that you're testing or your test case is linked to anything, you would need a lot of time to try to understand why it happened. Why is this, let's say, why is it working the way it is working at the moment? Because sometimes even it happens when you have especially a lot of tasks, it could be actually a requirement that you might have missed. And if you have traceability, you can say, okay, let me check my test case. Then you see that your test case is linking to a requirement. You go to that requirement and you see that you might have written the wrong test case. So it's not an issue. It's actually wrong interpretation. So the idea is to focus on traceability. So make sure to have, in a way, interface between your test cases, the tickets, and issues. So have them connected. So whenever something happens, you can just easily say, okay, if I don't understand something from the requirements, I can go to my test cases or to the issue and see what has happened. And yes, in most modern teams, you're not going to do these tables. You will be focusing on test management tools. And it's very easy to track to basically trace through them. It's very much visible which tickets are linked, which test cases are linked. So that's the best part about it. Okay. If there are no questions, leave 1 more minute if somebody wants to ask. I see Francesco is typing. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Then, yeah, Jumana, we can go with the.
Congratulations to duck number 12. Back to you, Angelo. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and we will continue off where we left off. So let me just make sure everything is sharing. Okay, there we go. Now, last bit was the traceability metrics, and now we're looking in the skills and good practices and benefits of basically having a perfect testing documentation. Now, here are some of the skills that are actually essential. And if some of you might have looked around at some of the, let's say, openings, job openings for QAs, usually these are more or less, not all of them, but maybe 80% that we will see here required. That doesn't mean that we don't want to have all of them. That just means those are usually the ones added. But nevertheless, one is attention to detail, and it is definitely the most important bit when it comes to documentation. So you want to make sure that all important information is added and errors are minimized. So you want to be very concrete. You want your steps, your descriptions to be on point. You want everything to be simplified yet understandable and documented. So an example here we can see is checking that each test case includes all steps and expected outcomes without missing critical details. So again, you want to make sure to always have everything implemented. Missing even one singular bit of information within the documentation can cause big issues, huge issues even for the project, because it can even resolve into a misunderstanding or some issues then appearing on production, which of course we do not want. Then we have technical writing. So we have to be able to write clearly and concisely. So the documentation, again, has to be understandable. So we don't just want to note the things that we write down. We want to make sure that whoever picks it up and then leads it forward has no hard time understanding what we tried to put down. Then we have analytical thinking. So when you write documentations, any kinds of test cases, scenarios especially, you will definitely come across complex requirements. Now these requirements need to be, let's say, divided into separate test scenarios and test cases. So we don't just want to take a complex requirement and just create one separate test case for its entirety. Obviously, we want to be able to analyze it, to in a way dismantle and decide which parts can be separately tested, how we will document this testing. Do we keep the test cases for each bit separate? Do we combine some? So having analytical thinking is key, because again, you will come across very complex requirements, and at times even some that might actually be out of your area of expertise. So you will definitely need to be focusing on how to simplify your workflow and document effectively. Communication skills. These are essential because, again, we need to be able to collaborate with team members, stakeholders, so whoever we need to work as closely related to as possible. And we have to make sure that this documentation at the end meets the needs of the stakeholders. So again, they would need to revise it. So being able to communicate what we need to add, what we need to take off is key. And this can be done again with developers, and you can also review such things with stakeholders, receive feedback, and then rework what you need to rework in regards to the documentation. Organizational skills. So basically having a good organization. This doesn't only relate to time-wise, so basically having a separate place where you will add the entire documentation. For example, if you're working on a project that has Jira and Confluence, you would want to store all documentations under a single QA folder, which will contain automation suite information, maybe performance test suite information, test case documentation, issue documentation. So you want them all to be centralized so they can be easily accessed, and keeping this in mind when wanting to prepare one document, something is essential. Now, if we want to create this documentation and we already have some of these necessary skills, what are some best practices when we go into the process? Well, using templates. I mentioned this previously a bit. On most projects, you will already have prepared templates, and having these templates provides a consistent structure, and it's easier for both you to create and then for the stakeholders or the other members of the team to basically review. I showed you the test plan last time, so that's sort of our template. And by having this template, we essentially just need to populate what data we need, so we don't always have to, in a way, try to remember, oh, at which point do we write the scope, the objectives, do we add bullet points? We essentially have this template and we just populate the data for each segment. A lot more simplified and easier to follow even for us, definitely. Regular updates. So if you have any changes that are influencing some part of the documentation, you want to update them immediately. And I will stress this again, it's very important to update documentation. So you don't want to just make it a one-time thing and then you don't need to worry about it. So whichever change you see and notice is linked to any test case, scenario, documentation you have did previously, make sure to update it. It's essential, and it's especially a lifesaver for many people that will be new to the project. Peer reviews. Oops, I scrolled a bit too far. Having peer reviews might support you in improving the documentation by identifying areas of improvement and errors. So having somebody go through the test plan or to the test cases, like again, somebody from the team or the stakeholders will definitely give you a lot of input on what you need to work on, what you can change, maybe some things that you might have added that are not necessarily needed at that point. So it definitely supports essentially continuous improvement when it comes to documentation. Then we have clear language. Simple, clear language makes it a lot more easier to understand for team members, for people who are with less technical background. So for example, Scrum Masters or somebody who is coming from the client side. So you want to make sure that even when they read it, as I said earlier, what applies to the test cases applies to documentation in general. You want to make sure that even somebody who has no clue about the application understands what you want to show them within the software. Finally, version control. Um, if you have version control of documentation, you will have all your changes tracked, and then you can revert back to previous versions as well if needed. If there are some issues with what you have now, you can reference something that was previously written in a way in that documentation, maybe to something new, so that it, let's say, a requirement that must not let's say appear but got through somehow into some of the user stories can be removed based on some previous agreements that are no longer needed. So version controlling documents is also essential. Now, once you have applied all your skills and main practices, what are the benefits that you can expect? Well, one of them, improved communication. So you would definitely have a clear communication between the team members because you will all have, in a way, a single reference point. So once everybody is on the same page, um, I just see a question. Do we get to learn basics of Git in this course? Um, I am not sure, but maybe we can I can get back to that, or Juman or Serafim, if you have some additional insight, um, you can provide the answer for that. Uh, moving on, uh, enhanced quality. So now that we're on the same page, knowing that we have all the information into one singular place, we know that all of the aspects are tested. Um, basically, just having this good coverage, having all the test cases, having all of the, let's say, the planning, the scripts that we need to do at one place centralized will make sure that what we test will be with the best result, because again, everything from that point will be covered. We will have it in mind. It will be a constant reminder in a way that makes us provide the best quality. Following that, traceability. This supports the traceability matrix. So in a way, we can always refer back to some of the things that we documented, and we can make sure that we have not missed something in the new upcoming requirements. Then we have accountability. Basically, when you have clear documentation, everybody has an idea of what they need to do at that point. So everybody assumes accountability for their part of the testing process. And again, I would agree. I would stress the onboarding part. Again, the documentation is super important for new members of the team. So once we have a clear, concise, and well-structured, up-to-date documentation, it makes it a lot simpler for the entire onboarding process. So even without, if you don't have this sort of documentation, it could take up to months of not being able to adapt new people to the team. Having clear documentation you can actually decrease that by a lot, even ranging from months to maybe even weeks, days, depending on, of course, the person's understanding as well. So for onboarding, it's really important to have this documentation because in a way it's their base source of learning. So remember, when doing documentation, don't only think about documenting it now for the current team, but for future uses moving onward. There are some good examples that we can also see. One, I will briefly just read the first and the second. So financial software company faced significant delays due to poor documentation. And by implementing thorough test documentation, they improved communication, reducing testing time. The project was completed on schedule with fewer defects and higher client satisfaction. So there was still some defects, but we can see that the testing time was reduced obviously, because maybe something was scattered in the previous iteration of the documentation. And then after narrowing it down, making sure their path is more or less clear and straightforward, they will be able to finish on time with as less defect as possible. So we can see that basically it is important to have these sort of skills that we mentioned, practice the good practices as often as possible, and then we will be, rest assured, getting all the benefits from in-depth documentation and applying those skills. Do you have any questions so far? I see not. We have, I think, this one more page of more talking, and then I think we will be a bit more interactive. Now, effective feedback, communication, and continuous improvement. Well, the testing process is not only about testing, documenting, and then making sure everything works. We also need to have a way of which we can improve the entire testing process and the software development lifecycle. That is run through communication, feedback, and we will talk a bit about this with retrospective meetings. Now, the feedbacks are important because feedbacks improve the quality. How so? If you get feedback early on, it could actually, in a way, showcase some potential issues, risks that could occur, and overall support the entire shift left testing. So starting this as soon as possible with as much information as possible will definitely improve the quality greatly. Enhances communication, so encourages open communication among team members, which will and then in turn lead to collaboration understanding. So you don't want to kind of hold your opinions for the software to yourselves. You want to provide feedback, be that tester to developer, developer to tester. It's very important to provide this feedback. So when you think something is out of the ordinary, it's best to speak up and discuss about it than just hold it in and risk having some kind of potential issue popping up without being aware of it. Drives continuous improvement. So having this feedback supports the team. Don't ever be afraid to take such feedback. So even if it's sometimes a lot more oriented towards testing, take it with as a positive insight because it will improve both your approach, the process, and the overall result. So having and giving this feedback is essential. Some methods to collect and utilize feedback: surveys and questionnaires. You could get structured feedback from team members. One of the more common ones in one-on-one meetings. So you can actually have one-on-one meetings. Most common, this is done with the Scrum Master. You can also, on your own accord, do these with a developer, let's say, or somebody else entirely from the team, and then you can essentially get an idea of how your workflow goes. If they ask, you can also provide them for feedback, and you can see which areas you can improve, not only from a testing perspective, but from an overall participation in the project. Feedback forms. These forms you might have already come across, such as some of these, like Google Forms, so on and so forth. They're usually standardized, and you can actually see some more information from those. And then observation, basically looking at the overall testing process, you can actually note down some things that you think could be done better. So let's say that you have plenty of time to test tickets, so everybody's taking it a bit slow and not trying to cover as much of the user stories that are done as possible. That could probably be a potential issue since it's basically waiting on time and not doing testing as soon as possible. So you can note that down and use it as feedback that you can implement later on in the process. The way to utilize the feedback effectively is analyze it, so identify common themes and areas of improvement, implement changes, so not just talk about it and receive it, but also make sure to adjust what you can adjust. And the best thing to keep in mind here is that you don't necessarily have to immediately put everything into place from the feedback, but you try to build on. Communicate actions and follow up. So you want to inform the team about the feedback received, what actions did you take, so what did you modify, and then make sure that after you've taken these actions, either something is improved or you've noticed that something needs to be additionally modified so it could come to the best state possible. Now, moving to effective communication, some of the key communication strategies include regular meetings. There is usually a type of these meetings. They're usually called stand-ups or daily meetings. They are done every day. So you basically come together with everybody from the team and you want to give updates on where you are with the task that you're currently working on. And it's effective for tracking progress and getting an idea of when something is expected to go for testing, if something is blocking something else, so essentially getting updates related to the project. Using collaborative tools, so Slack, Teams, Jira, all of these are utilized for communication. If you are working in a team where everybody's, let's say, scattered across the world, you will definitely need to make use of Teams, Slack, and if you don't even communicate through those channels, then most often you could either email or use Jira comments for that. Clear documentation. Having comprehensive documentation is key in communication because this way you would be able to see and discuss with the other members of the team what things might be missing, what can be added, and what is your overall idea of doing throughout this process. Establishing communication protocols. So basically defining how and when communication should occur. This is most commonly done in relation to clients. So there are teams that directly communicate with clients. This is the protocol. And there are teams where only the manager or scrum master discusses with the clients and then forwards information to the team. And finally, foster a culture of openness. So make sure that every idea is heard, make sure that feedback is constructive, given and received openly, and essentially make so that everybody can have their input within the project. So it's ideal if everybody could get their idea across, if they can give input. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is always accepted, but it's good for learning for everyone to understand what can be done and what can't be done, and also showing that everyone does have an input within the project. So those are some of the key communication strategies. Now, pardon me. How does this all um, play into defect management? Well, um, when you have good communication, you basically get accurate defect reporting. So let's say you have this Jira system where you want the bugs. If you provide the necessary documentation, you can easily send that via Slack, Teams, so whichever is the communication channel, or verbally. So you basically make sure to even provide extra detail on top of what's already written for somebody who needs to go through it. Efficient defect tracking, so everybody is informed, is in the loop once you open, let's say, a bug ticket. It is on a channel where everybody can access it, so this information is given. Prioritizing defects, so again, it helps prioritize defects based on severity. Facilitating collaboration, so when you have these issues, usually it's not the effort that only the developer, let's say, fixes it and you test, everybody takes part. Maybe some parts of the issue need to be added to a separate issue, so that is a common case, and having this collaboration, communication in between is crucial. And then improving test coverage, so you can actually in a way learn from that, from the defect management and the communication overall, because sometimes, again, you could come across scenarios where you might not have enough, where you might be missing some issue that might have been added. So for future reference, you can recheck those. If you find them again, you will have an increased coverage, of course. If not, you'll make sure to at least cover those scenarios, even if they work. Now, the last bit I want to talk about here is continuous improvement and retrospectives. Now, what is a retrospective meeting? For me personally, I think this is an essential meeting, or let's say an essential ceremony in the software development lifecycle, because you basically see what has been worked on, what you can improve, what actions need to be taken, and also one stage that is not mentioned really here, give kudos to somebody who you believe that did something outstanding, which can be motivating. So what happens? First, you set the stage. So you create the safe environment where everybody feels comfortable sharing their thoughts. Again, this is not something that is done on the first ever retrospective meeting. Obviously, this is built throughout time, but it is important to showcase that everybody should share their opinion. You gather data. This is usually done through Miro. You have 4 columns with sticky notes, and then everybody basically provides something based on their experience from the previous working period. Then generate insights. you see the data after everybody writes down their notes. You see some patterns within it. So you basically discuss with the team members what are their thoughts. So what do they think that they need to improve? How can you improve that? If something went well, why did it went well? What did we do? So you essentially try to see and note down everything that was good and needs to be improved. Then decide on actions. Basically, there's a separate column, actions. Everybody knows then what you needs to be taken in the next step. So maybe in the next development iteration or in the future. It doesn't necessarily have to be right now or immediately. And as I mentioned, if you believe somebody has done something outstanding, you usually want to write down the kudos. Again, it's very motivating for both them, and it shows them that you are essentially supportive and you have gratitude for their work. So it is supportive and it does support the first point, which is set the stage. Finally, close the retrospective. You summarize everything that's been discussed, the key points, action items, and document them. And then they can be reused for future reference on at any point. Now, how they drive continuous improvement, identify weakness. So it helps pinpoint weaknesses and areas of improvement, as I mentioned. It promotes collaboration, implements incremental changes. So you want to make these improvements as time goes on, so you can bring more quality to the product and then foster a learning culture. Essentially, they promote this idea of getting feedback throughout these retrospective meetings so that you can both learn what you can do better and also understand what you did well and when you need to keep on doing, because obviously it's having a positive effect. That is basically it for this area. I think we can move in the interest of time to the next section, so we'll skip this exercise. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I see all good. Then I'm going to move to the next step, which is defect management and defect lifecycle. Okay, so we talked a bit about documentation. Now we're going to focus a bit on the defect management. Well, managing defects is basically a process of identifying, documenting, and also resolving, and then moving it later in later stages, the defect itself. So it's basically the entire, let's say, process of finding, documenting, and then resolving the defect. Now, oops, I want to actually do this first. Let me do it like, there we go. So in order to find defects in software, you can apply different techniques. The types of techniques that you can actually do for defects depends on the types of testing that we mentioned. So we had dynamic testing and we have static testing. And we already mentioned that you can actually find these defects even when performing static testing. So my question right now, which some of you might have saw, but I believe that I was quick enough to scroll up. Can you give me some examples of static defects? So any static defect that you can think. You can write it in the live chat. I'll give another hint. It was related to static testing. So you derive the static defects from there. Let's see. Okay. Maybe my mic was. So my question is, can you give me an example of a static bug, static defect? I see, would syntax errors be defects? Is that correct? Yeah, Jordan, that's actually correct. Syntax errors, examining the code, it is a static defect. Wonderful. That is correct. Let's see something else provided. I'm gonna wait a bit. I see several people are typing. Let's see. Wrong requirements, test case correlation, documentation. Wonderful. Yeah, Francesco, that's a great example. That is again a static defect, having wrong requirements. So even in the test case when we write it down, that's still a static defect. Okay. All right, I see multiple people are writing, so I'm guessing that you already got the hang of it, of the static testing and the dynamic testing principles, which is very good. Error in a written test case. Yeah, that's correct. Missing something within the test case is definitely a static issue. Code never execute. Well, jixing, this is more related to a different type of defect, but I will move on and get back to that. So yes, static techniques. So no code execution required. So you find issues that are related to uh, requirements. So for example, somebody might have written the entire flow for the login, but might have forgotten to mention how everything should work within the forgot password page. So you're going to write that as a static defect. You will ask obviously to get that detail provided, but missing that entire requirement is a static issue. Also, you can, as Jordan said, fixing syntax or going through syntax with linting tools that we mentioned. You can find some of these defects which are again static, so the application is not executed. This is within the code. So again, something that has not been yet executed, yet it's still wrong. Now, the other type of defects are dynamic defects. So I want to ask you once again, could you provide me an example of a dynamic, let's say, defect? So some dynamic bug that you would consider, that you have found doing dynamic testing. I think this might be um, a tricky wording, but let's see. I already see some people typing. A cycle that never breaks from Francesco. Yeah, that is correct. If something is repetitive, you can't go out of it. It's a bit more complex example, definitely, but yeah, it is correct nevertheless. Let's see some others. This a cycle that never breaks could also actually be static if you catch it within the code while you're analyzing it. So it could be on both ends already. But an interesting example nevertheless. Let's see some other examples. So dynamic testing. What bugs can you find? It can be any example. Memory leaks. If yes, can we assign defects to the UI5 devs? Yes, that is correct. And yes, so memory leaks are dynamic issues because you need the application running for a memory leak and it's done with non-functional testing. So yeah, that is correct. Dynamic defects found during code execution. That is correct. Yeah, Daniel, that is correct. Functional defects, wonderful. Yeah, all functional defects basically fall under this category. So very well said, Binu. Yeah, so dynamic techniques are basically evaluating how everything works in execution. So some examples would be to find issues with unit, integration, system, acceptance, basically any type of functional or non-functional testing. So it goes both ways. Security bugs, jixing, very well said. Yeah, that is correct. All right, now, when you want to find and document these issues both using static and dynamic techniques, you can of course use manual and automated tool support. So you can use automated testing tools. We already mentioned Selenium, JUnit, TestNG. So you can use any of these for efficiency and repeatability. You can use manual techniques, so ad hoc testing and using checklists for coverage assurance. Again, this is something that you can do when you need to do maybe exploration testing. So you have a checklist to note down the scenarios and issues that you find. Defect tracking tools like Jira, Bugzilla, Mantis B2. We already mentioned these to track and manage the defect reports. Now, we know what are the types of, what are the main types, let's say, of defects we can see. Now, let's see what is the actual defect lifecycle. So a defect has its own lifecycle. We're going to see it here. And it starts with, first of all, being identified and reported. So this stage is known as new. Then once you find it, you want to essentially create a ticket for it. And then you assign it to a developer or team for resolution. So this depends on the project. It could be a single person, multiple again. So you assign this defect to a person. Then the assigned developer begins analyzing and fixing it, which is open. So they have viewed the issue. then it's fixed. So the developer has resolved the defect. So maybe they did some code changes, content changes, whatever the issue was. Then we have pending retest, basically waiting to be retested by us or the testing team. So again, whoever worked on the defect, who found the defect. Then we have retest. The testing team retests the application and confirms that everything is fixed. When this is done, we have the verified phase. So defect is fixed, and then it is marked as verified, or you just write down a comment that everything is working as expected. Close, the defect is considered resolved after successful verification, so it's done. And then this is when you usually move it to a board which either kind of like keeps track of everything that's been resolved or done until that point, and you have reopened. If something related to this defect happens again, or the defect persists after some time, you reopen it and then go through this life cycle again. Basically, this is a life cycle which we'll see later in the Jira exercise, from creating the ticket, adding the data, assigning it, and then we won't actually do the developer process, but those come as a given since they need to open it, fix it, mention in the ticket so you can retest. So that is the idea of this life cycle. Some types of defects that I would like to mention are functional defects, performance defects, usability, compatibility, security, syntax. So these are basically all different types falling under static and dynamic defects that we can find. Some of you already mentioned them. Functional performance, you can have memory leaks, you can have the button not sending you to the correct URL. Usability, you might have too big font weight on some, let's say, menus, and you can't really click all of the items. Compatibility, so maybe you can use the application on Google Chrome, but not on Edge. Security defects, there could be vulnerabilities of a breach, cyber attack. So again, these are more or less the different types of defects classified. Having an idea of what type of defect it is definitely helpful when you want to write down a report, but it's usually not mandatory when working on real life projects. So this you don't need to basically remember everything by heart, but when having the experience, you'll more or less understand what kind of defect you are dealing with at that moment. Okay, so I have this question which I think we can do. At which stage of the defect lifecycle is a defect when it's waiting to be retested by the testing team? You can write 1 to 4, A to D, ICC already, pending retest. Okay. I see multiple people writing down C. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm going to select because obviously the vast majority is selecting it, and that is the correct answer. So when it's waiting to be tested, it's pending. Retest is not actually retested, so it's waiting for it to finish. Very well done. Do you have any questions for this part? Okay. If not, I'm going to move to the defect reports and fixing defects. Okay, now this is one of the more important parts for defect management, and that is the defect reports and the process of fixing it. So a defect report, you might heard of it as a bug report, is a formal record of something that has been discovered, which is an issue during testing. It could be static, dynamic. Usually for static, you don't really write these in detailed reports, but more or less for dynamic, this is the practice. Now, what you want to do with this report, you want to document what went wrong, where it occurred, what was detected, write down steps, track. So classify what kind of defect is it, what is its priority, what level did it occur to, which environment. So it's basically a small ticket or report that you want to showcase what is actually happening with the issue. Now, what are the key components of this comprehensive defect report? We have a few. First of all, you have the defect ID. Why is this identifier important? You want to be able to somehow reference and track the defect easily. So having this unique ID to all defect reports is crucial so that you can understand what the issue is. Then you have a title summary. It's similar to when we were designing test cases. So you want to have a short summary to basically showcase what is the defect about. You have a description section where you write a detailed explanation of the defect. So you want to basically note down what is happening for the defect itself. And then you want to include steps. So similar to when we were doing test cases, you want to do the steps that you basically applied to reach or recreate the defect. So this is the standard flow basically when you create this. So here is an example. Open application, navigate to login page, enter valid username, password, click the login button. Some of you already did this when we did the exercise, so it is the same flow, similar flow to test cases. Then you want to showcase the expected and actual results. So you want to say what was expected or what you were supposed to get as a result and what you actually got. This will actually be very useful, especially for developers, because they know at which point something is fairly, since usually they do have this kind of point where they're basically in the logic where they want to get that result. And then, as I mentioned, you want to assign the severity and priority. So is this low, high, medium priority? What is the environment? If it's a browser, which browser? If it's an operating system, which operating system? And then add in attachments. When having bugs, I really want to state that you want to add attachments. So having screenshots or log data is crucial because it very much helps developers to find and work on the issue. So just having it described in detail is good, it's great, but having this attachment can really reduce the workload and give the person who will be working on the issue as much information as possible. So keep in mind, when possible, or if possible, try to do it always, add an attachment to the defect report. Now, when writing these defect reports, you want to be clear and concise. Again, similar to the test cases, we want to make sure that it's understood what we have found, what is the issue, and where can be, how can it be replicated. We want to provide detailed steps to reproduce. So you don't just want to write steps as you see fit or as they're simpler for you, but you want to make sure that they are detailed. You want to make sure that they follow the exact things that you did to get the issue. Include the expected and actual results. As I mentioned, add attachments, use screenshots and logs. Very helpful for going through and debugging the code to find the issue, and assign appropriate severity and priority, because sometimes some issues could be neglected if you do not do so. So assigning this will give a sense of urgency to the bug, and it will be definitely picked up a lot sooner than you'd expect. Now, regarding the defect fixing process, these are some of the steps there that are taken as measures. We have the identification. So first, the defect is detected and reported, and then the process begins. Then it is assigned. So it's similar to the bug lifecycle. You can make a connection to it. Basically, so developer will take over. Usually it is the person who also worked on the feature. It is analyzed, then it is fixed within the code. Then the code is reviewed, so somebody would go through the code to make sure that the changes are applied appropriately, that the principles for clean code are followed. Then, after that is done, it is pushed, you test whether this works, and then you do a bit of regression testing to make sure that this does not affect anything else in relation to that feature. And after everything is done, and everything is working as expected, comes the best part, which is closure. So you mark it as done and you move it on. I say it is the best part because it is happening for both tester and developer. So essentially, this is the similar, let's say, process of the bug lifecycle. However, it's a bit more related to fixing it. Now, the last bit I want to highlight here, and I want you to remember, it could happen that you come into scenarios where some developers, I'm also speaking from personal experience, might not might take your issues and bugs with a bit of an offense, let's say. So they might think that their code is absolutely written well, and that you're just trying to, in a way, break it. To avoid such scenarios, it is important to have open communication channels, regular updates. So some of these points that we see here, joint review sessions, encourage feedback. But what's also important is to have good means of communication between you and the developers and how you present the issues. You want to be correct. You want to present the issues not in a way that would make stress. So if you find something that's important, there's always a way to communicate that. Just try not to be, let's say, uh, to rush with information. Always make sure to present your findings in a calm and respectable manner so that both the developer side and the tester side can basically work together in a calm and collaborative manner. So make sure when working with developers to have this sense and approach and empathy, so not just to rush out and make the bug that has found the biggest issue on the planet. So everything can be resolved. So it needs to be communicated in such manner. In addition to that, as I mentioned, open communication channels, which you mentioned earlier, so having different types that we can all collaboratively communicate is important. Regular updates, joint review sessions, so even meetings where you can go to test cases and issues together to see what can be modified and improved. Having feedback between developers and testers support both the development and the testing process. So having these is crucial. And again, collaborative culture, making sure that we provide the information that we need in a fair, calm, and understandable manner without trying to make some commotion with it. Do you have any questions for this part? Okay. All right. I think we can have the last break now, and
Okay,
then we'll create with two practical parts. Yeah.
perfect. So enjoy a 10-minute break, folks. See you soon. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So let's continue where we left off. So we are currently, let me just see if the screen is visible. Okay, great. So we are currently at the how to create and maintain effective defect list. Now, a defect list is like just having an essential collection of all the defects that you found. Again, on most projects, this is usually some kind of bug board or defect board. So you have all of them listed there. Essentially, all those that are currently in progress to do, or those that are also done. They usually go to a different section, but you can also see them for a brief amount of time. Now, when you want to create a defect list, you want to have each defect want to be logged with these specific bits, so to make sure that everything is added to the defect itself. Now, usually you will have these project management tools like Jira, Bugzilla, where you will log these defects, and you can also utilize them to make these defect lists and boards where you can also keep a track of all of them. Also, you can annotate and note them in separate documents, for example, in Word or Excel. You can also add them there. Essentially, it is to know why what you track them by. So if it's the defect ID, title, so essentially, so you can create your list. What are the key building blocks? You have the defect ID, which is the unique identifier, title summary, which is basically what the bug is about, the description, basically what is happening with the issue, then the severity priority, how big is the impact and what is the priority. Following that, we have the status, current status, whether it's new, assigned, in progress, environment, where it happened, and the attachments. Now, in order to maintain such a list, you have to be aware of what is the status of each defect. That's why I mentioned at the beginning, you usually have boards where you maintain all of the defects. Those serve as your lists, and you essentially make sure to see whether something is still on the to-do list, whether something has been picked up, it's in progress, whether something is in testing, so you can go ahead and check it. So essentially having this list is very good for maintaining all of the defects and making sure that they are all taken care of accordingly and that we understand at which phase we can also start testing. And after completion, we can move them to a separate documentation. Now, for this part, we have an interesting exercise. So in this exercise, we will have a scenario. So we have multiple things listed here, and they will all be different issues. So we will need to find the defects and create a detailed bug report for each one using the format discussed earlier. So this is the scenario. You're testing a new e-commerce web application called ShopEasy. During testing, you encounter the following issues. So we have login page, we have the forgot password link does not work, clicking it does nothing, incorrect error message displayed when entering an invalid email format. The message has error invalid input instead of error, please enter a valid email address. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down here, copy this selection, and we're going to do this together. And the first one I will just write down so we can see it here. So let me see if it's there. Okay. And we're going to go through the steps at this time together. So we're going to just start and mark this defect ID number 1. And we're going to start off with the forgot password. So the first point that we need to do is we need to add a title. So the forgot password link does not work. Clicking it does nothing. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we have a good naming. So what I'm going to write for the title is going to be the forgot password link does not redirect the user to the forgot password. Where is it? Not there we go. Page. So you see the way that I did the title is similar to when we're doing the test cases. So instead of going for showing what we are verifying as the title, I'm actually trying to show what is the main issue as the title. So when I go into the description, I already have a fairly good title. I can just write when the user selects the forgot password link, nothing happens. So essentially, we should expect to see something else, but nothing happens when we select it. That is more enough for the description. And now we have the severity, priority, status, environment, attachments. So we are missing a few fields here, which I'm gonna add right now. Now, mind you, how you add the fields, it's not very important. For me personally, I like to do test steps first. And then I want to do expected result and actual result. Now, I'm just gonna do here a tab. Now let's do some of the steps that we need to get to this issue. So I'm gonna assume that we're going to this page. So I'm gonna say navigate to the login page. Then we need to select the forgot password link. So I'm gonna say select the forgot password link and then observe. So sometimes you could actually end up writing the result here. It is best to try avoid that. So just try to write the step that you want to do and avoid writing the actual result that you happen to see within the issue. So then we see that let's say that the link should take us somewhere. So I'm gonna write the forgot password link should redirect the user to the forgot password page when selected. So this is what we want to see. This is what we need to have to happen. And when I select it, I actually see nothing happens. The link is not responsive, meaning I just click the link and nothing occurs. Now, when I look at this, I want to also assign severity and priority. So when we are at the login page, our most important feature is obviously to log in. So to be able to enter a valid username and get and password and be able to sign in, or enter an invalid one and then not be signed in. So when thinking about the forgot password link, it is important, but definitely not the highest priority. So I'm just going to write medium here. It is not the lowest priority, like let's say styling, but it's again not the most important, like logging into the actual application. For status, I'm going to write open because we just created it. Environment, I'm currently testing on Chrome, so I'm going to write Google Chrome for now. And then I don't have any attachments, so I'm just going to write none for this. But again, it's a practice to have them. If we had the actual page, we could actually just do the screenshot and then maybe attach it as well. That is basically the gist of it. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this. We're going to scroll a bit down. Now I want to see if some of you would want to help me with the second test case. So I'm going to copy this down. All right, I can just I'm going to raise the data here. Same goes for the title summary. There we go. And this is in a new row. There we go. Okay. Does somebody want us to do this bit here? So the incorrect message displayed when entering invalid email format. If you want, you can write steps for me in the live chat, and we can do it together. So let's start, for example, from the top. So we have the ID. So let's see what could be the potential title or summary for this issue. Does somebody have an idea? Again, you can write them in the live chat and I will note it in the notepad. So what could we provide as title here? So the incorrect message displayed when entering an invalid email format. So we see that we have an issue with the message. We want to see some kind of different error message. So what can we put for the title? Okay, I see some people are typing. Let's see. Okay, that's very good, Francesco. Incorrect message displayed when entering an invalid email format. I like it very much. And I'm actually gonna, as a matter of fact, go with that one. It's actually very good, very concise, and it gets the job done for the title field. So very well done for that. It's very nice and neat. Okay, for the status, I'm also gonna remain it to be open, and then I'm just gonna move directly into the description, which I do erase. So yes, defect ID, I will change that. Thank you for the heads up. That's attention to detail in practice. So regarding the description, what can we say for the incorrect message, error message field? What description would we write down here? The message says error invalid. Yep, great. That's great thinking. So we can actually reuse what we already have in this information here. The message says error invalid input instead of error. Please enter a valid email address. So we can actually reuse that, which is a very common practice, especially for descriptions. So I'm just gonna move it a bit here. Now we see description, so we can say the message says error invalid input instead of please enter a valid email address. What I would add here would be when the user inputs an invalid mail, the message says error invalid input instead of. So I'm gonna add that, and I see already Francesco wrote that. Yeah, and also Valentino put it down when entering in invalid email format. So I'm gonna copy that bit because you also wrote it at the beginning, and I'm gonna when entering invalid email format, the message says. So I'm just gonna do this. Message says error invalid instead. So basically, we're writing what happened when doing this. So now we need to focus on the steps. So who wants to mention what are the steps? And can we reuse some of the steps we already have, which is very key. Okay, all right, Francesco, let's see. Navigate to the login page. So I'm gonna copy that. Input a wrong email format. Observe. That's a very good approach. I see Susan also provided the same. So I'm just gonna copy the answers that you guys provided. I'm just going to do it here so it's a bit more visible. There we go. So we have basically the test steps that you provided. So navigate to the login page, enter invalid email format, and observe. So basically, those are the steps that we need to do, quite straightforward. Anything else would be a bit overkill, so we want to focus on these. And then we want to write down the expected and actual result. So for this one, we can actually take the expected and actual from the wording. So we see here, when entering invalid email format, the message says error invalid input. So you already know what is the actual result. So we can just copy this and say the error message says error invalid input. Whereas the expected result is also written here, which says enter a valid email. So we can say the error message says error, please enter a valid email. So when making a defect report, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to think of everything separately and not reuse something from the logged issue or from the user story. So you can actually reuse some of the information even in your test cases and provide it as a means of populating the report. So this is perfectly fine to add these details since they do satisfy the given field. Now, depending on the severity and priority, what would you think is the best fit here? So do you think it's low, medium, high, highest? What priority and severity would you classify this? This would be the last field that we need to use. Low, yeah, low. I see Bino and Francesco wrote low. High, without email, the user can't log in. Well, when we're testing here, Valentin, actually, we're entering an invalid email format and we are not logged in. So we only get a wrong error message. So we're not really testing whether we can log in, but we're actually testing the error message. And this error message, technically, if you look at it, it's not really connected to whether we can log in. Uh, yeah. So I would also agree with Francesco and Bino and say this is low because again, it's a message. It's very easy to modify. Usually, it's not very tied to the functionality. So even if we have please enter invalid input, it's not the scariest bit for the users. They still understand that they did not enter something correctly. So again, it's not the highest priority. It's not the lowest. It's low, but still, it's in that range. Regarding the status and environment, we do not need to add anything else. Again, we will see later more of this in Jira. Okay, I'm not going to continue with the rest. We can touch on them if you want in Jira, in the Jira exercise, because we will have time for that. So I will continue on with the importance of prioritizing, categorizing defects. So one of the fields that we had here was the priority, severity. You usually have this again in the project management tools. It's very important when managing defects to make sure that they have the right priority. You can have high, medium, low. In some management studios, you could actually enumerate them. Again, this is all different approaches. And it's very important because you want to make sure that the ones that have the highest impact and priority are the ones tackled first. So if you just go ahead and label all of them, let's say medium, maybe developers will not take into consideration how important the issue is and how significant of a defect you have discovered and just give it a bit more time. And then you might go into a state where you have to test something critical in a very short amount of time. So prioritizing them based on what is needed is essential. High priority, medium, low. So we covered the medium scenario regarding the forgot password, a low one. So it's just the error message. And for high priority, we mentioned two examples, the same, the login. So we don't want to log in with an invalid mail, and we do want to log in with an actual account. So these are the highest priorities if we have defects related to them. Another thing related to this is categorizing defects. So it's important to note what kind of defect it is, whether it's functional, performance, usability, security. Again, you will have the option to add this information in some management studios as well. But if you note this, it's more helpful for stakeholders. So when they go to it, they understand, okay, we had a memory leak, it's performance related, because usually they're not so versed in those technical aspects. So having this categorization will help them also better understand what was worked on, why it was worked on, and how it impacts the overall application. Some of the metrics that we have here for report tracking, for defect tracking reporting is defect density, so number of defects per unit size, their severity distribution, so distributing them based on their severity. So basically it supports how to prioritize on what should be fixed and when among developers. Defect removal efficiency, so the percentage of removed defects during a particular phase of development. So in a sprint, let's say you've resolved 5 out of 6 bugs, so you've covered more or less 86% of them. Mean time to repair, how much time it takes to solve these issues, and the age of the time lapse between when it was found, let's say, and the resolution. So whether it takes 6 months or 5 days to go through the defect itself. How to interpret and use these metrics to improve the testing process. Again, this is more related to test management. So you want to basically analyze trends. So review defect metrics to identify trends. If you have a high defect density, it might say that you have to have a lot more testing or better code review. You want to focus on high impact areas. So first, the ones that are most crucial to the product, improve the processes. So going through the entire process using the defect removal efficiency, time to repair, so that you can reduce these times, because that obviously would improve the overall process, and enhance coverage. So obviously it could actually, so these metrics could reveal that there are gaps in the overall test coverage. So you want to go through test plan cases, scenarios, and revise them and make sure that the coverage is adequate. All right. I think that's basically it for this area. Do we have any questions? All right. If not, I think we should move to the lab with Jira, because I think this is the most engaging and interesting part that we will tackle for now. So I'm just gonna go here, and then if we have time, we'll go through the best practices and do a conclusion. All right. So today we're going to be working a bit with Jira. We're going to create some defects. We're going to see how the process in Jira works, what we can add, what we cannot add. So the entirety of the bug reporting system that it provides. I hope that at least most of you managed to complete steps 1 and 2. So we will not be going in this lecture through them. So we will continue directly from step 3. So one more time, I'm just going to repeat. So we already talked a bit about Jira. It is a project management tool. It is not only used for testing, it is used to basically track the overall work of the entire team. And it's also used to support testing by means of providing a system of adding test tickets, linking them to existing scenarios or user stories, and to issues. So it's actually tool that we mostly use throughout the entire development lifecycle, and it is the most widely used one on most projects. Now, what will we be doing today? So we are working with a client who has an e-commerce store. This is the website, demoblaze.com, and they have requested for the sign-up page that we have the following fields. So we have the email, the first name, the last name, username, password, and CAPTCHA. So these are the fields that they requested, meaning we have to implement all of them. Now, the development team has informed us that the sign-up page is ready, so we can test this. So what we need to do is go to the page, locate the sign-up, and see what we have on the sign-up page, whether we have all of them, and note all the requirements that we have, what has been implemented, what has not, and then we need to make a list of what is missing and what is not, so what is present. Then we will log them in Jira. So let's go to the demo Blaze page briefly. So I'm going to open it here. We see the sign up right here. And when I click on it, I see a pop-up. So for now, I see the username, I see the password. And if I compare, I do have the username and the password. However, we are missing email, we are missing first name, we are missing last name, and we're missing the CAPTCHA. So majority of components are not actually present on the page itself, meaning that although we are informed that we can actually continue with testing, we already found the bug which we need to log. Now, since we know we have this issue, we need to move on to Jira. And these are the steps that we will follow to create our first bug. So now I'm going to open my Jira. So if you were able to set up the Jira, you should be able to see this kind of environment on your end as well. You will see that all of these tickets have some kind of different icons. Usually these icons, which you can see here, are based on the type of ticket that this is. So for example, this is a task. This is a user story. Usually you get the requirements in these user stories, and then you link tasks to them. For example, if this has, let's say, 10 requirements and a developer thinks that they would need more time for separate tasks, in order to log and track their work, they would create 3 subtasks and then say, okay, 3 requirements are covered in this subtask, 3 are in this one, and the remainder in the final. You also have these little bug icons here. So these are for bugs. When you open them, you will most likely open them a lot and you will see these. And those are the ones that we will be working on today. So let's see what we need to do to create a bug. So first of all, we need to click the create button on the top of the menu, and then we're going to fill out the details here. So let's start that. We're going to click create on the top right. We have our project selected here. By default, you might have Epic or Story, so you just select the drop down here and click on Bug. Once you've selected it, you will see you have these multiple fields. And what I want to usually do, you do not have to do it this way. We can do one after this one. The way I do it, I usually just populate some 1 or 2 characters in these description and summary, the required fields, and then I create it, and afterwards I populate all the data for visibility purposes. But for this first one, we can do it as the instructions detail. So it says we need to add a summary, add a concise title for the bug. Okay, so let's write the title of the bug. So we notice that we are missing some fields. So what I'm going to write for the summary here is that the sign up page is missing some of its components. So the issue here is basically to add the missing components. So the summary is that the sign up page does not have all the components. Then the next part that we see here is the description. So write a detailed description of what's wrong with the sign up functionality. Include the issues you observed during your review. So what we notice that we do not have these components missing. So we're going to write the sign up page is missing the following components. And I'm just gonna list them so it could be a bit more visible. So we're going to write down email. Thank you, Jumana, for posting them in the comment. So this is very helpful. First name, last name, CAPTCHA. So these are the 4 fields that we're missing, and we just write in the description, sign up page is missing the following components. Now, if I go back to the requirements here, we see we need to add a priority, change to high, attachments if possible. So we could make screenshots if needed, and then add a due date. So we're going to go back to the issue. We have the priority right below this. I'm going to assign high. If you click on priority, you can also notice you have 4 types. You have lowest, low, medium, and highest. We're currently selected high, that's why you can see it. These are the 4 additional ones. Depending on the issue, you will assign the priority. Most of the time, it would be you who assigns it. However, it's important to discuss this before you assign it. So it's not that you only discover and say, okay, this is the highest. You also need to discuss with the developer and Scrum Master to make sure why you're assigning that priority. In addition to this, you can assign this to yourself. Usually assign it to a developer. For the time being, I'm going to put myself because I'm the only one on the board, but you usually select from a drop-down somebody who's part of the team who will work on this bug. Then you have a due date. This was set to be done for next week, so I'm going to put here the 3rd of December. And if you have, usually we have labels to distinguish different boards. You can add the label here. Now we don't have this, so we're going to create the bug. Once you're done, you're going to see it here. You created SCS8. It is also displayed here. So I'm just going to click on view and we will be taken to the bug page. So you see Okay. What we have is the entirety of what Jira provides for bugs. I see a question. Just wondering, in terms of bug reporting, what would be the difference when comparing Jira and Azure DevOps? That's a good question. It's essentially how the software itself works. In Jira, this is the approach where you create an issue. I think it's similar in Azure DevOps. I think the layout for how the bug looks like is different, so that is also in play, but which one you use is dependent on the client. So it's a similar procedure. So once you practice on one management software, it's very similar to the other, and it's usually the layout that's the difference. So I hope that answers the question. Okay, now we have our bug right here. And now let's do a bit of a review. We have a description, then we have a comment, and then that's it. So when you look at it this way, we essentially do not have anything specific tied to this ticket here. What we need to do now is, aside within the description, add additional fields. So when you do this in Jira, you will not have like a separate section to write, okay, I'm going to write my steps here, and then I'm going to write expected result here, but you actually play around with this within the description. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how I write the bugs using all of the fields that we had previously. So first of all, I already have the ID. So this is the ID of the ticket, ECS8. It's usually done once you create it. I have the priority. What I'm missing is the steps, the expected, the actual result, and the environment. So what I do is I usually just select the description and I add everything within it. Again, Jira does not have separate steps that you can do. Maybe there are some plugins, you can research that if you want, that you can install for this, but from my knowledge currently, I have not found some. So what we can do is we can just, this is the description, so we can do something like this. We enter a place and write steps to replicate. Oops, I tabbed out. And then we're going to write the steps that we need to replicate the issue. So we say navigate to the Blaze meter page. And now what I usually want to do here is actually want to add the link to the page. So it's easier for somebody who might not, for somebody who might be using a different page to get here to just have a direct link. So I usually want to do this in the steps. Select the sign up label at the top right. So you want to select the sign up as it was given in the steps. Observe the sign up. Do this form. So I think these are more than enough of the steps because we go to the page, click sign up, and then use and look at the sign up form. Now what I usually do is I leave a bit of space and then I write actual result expected result. And then for the actual result, I write the following fields are missing. And I write email, first name, last name, and CAPTCHA. Expected result. The user should be able to see all of the fields mentioned in the ticket. And now, why I write this like this? One way that you can provide all results is you can add a link to the ticket here. So you can write all of the fields that you want that need to be displayed and then link the ticket where they're displayed. That is one way. The way we're going to write it right now is I'm just going to list all of the fields. You should be able to see the following fields. And then I'm just going to copy paste these. Username and password. Now, why did I add all of the fields here? Again, if we want to test later something, or if the developers are going through the issue, they might forget about these, and when modifying something, they might even exclude them. So I want to make sure when they look at the expected result, they say, okay, I need to only add 4 more fields and make sure I don't erase the others. Now, if you want to make it a bit fancier, I usually bold this. So I understand that this is the steps to replicate. I usually underline the actual and the expected results to promote visibility. I actually am gonna add an extra row here. And then I avoid adding bullet points when doing description. So this is now currently, because of the nature of the application, you usually won't be just noting down missing components like this. You'd usually write them in the description. But so this is my description part at the top. So what is missing? You can also, if you want to do, is right here, like issue description, and just bold this as well. You can also do that. But you need to do a bit more playing around here, since you do not have everything provided like we had with test rail where we're doing the test cases. And once you're satisfied with all this, you can click on save. And we see we have the steps that we need to do. We have the actual, the expected result, and we have the general description. On the right side, you will see that we have some of these issues that we have. And then let me just see. Did I forget to show something? I think no. That's basically it. All right. Do you have any questions regarding this bug creation? I accidentally chose Scrum in the beginning, so it doesn't have the exact same options. How do I change this? I see already. Yeah. Thank you, Seraphim. He sent this. Do you have any questions in regard to this ticket? I see some of you are typing in the chat, so I'm going to wait a bit to see. Could you open a new ticket, please? I missed how to get there. Yep, of course. Let me just go back to the board. Okay, I'm at the board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click create. I'm going to wait a bit. And once we click create, we will see this work type here. Again, I highly recommend after this lesson you play around and create a story task. I'll show you one more thing you can create. I selected bug. So for me, it was pre-selected, but let's say I change it right now. For you, it could be user story. So you just click on bug. And once you click on bug, you would need to populate the mandatory fields. So in this case, it's summary. Again, I usually want to leave this at the end. So I usually just do this. I write like any character here. And then you need to populate all the remaining fields. I think the only one is the summary that is mandatory. So once you add something here, you can essentially create the ticket. And now we see we have the 9th ticket. Is that okay? Yeah, no worries. Okay. In addition to this, do you want us to, because I think for this exercise, this is more or less it. So this is the only field that we have. So do you want us maybe go back to this defect list creation metrics page and do one more scenario and we create one more bug together? If that's okay. I think it would be a good practice. Just gonna scroll down. Okay. So I think what we can do now is I already created the bug ticket. So let's do the same that we did here previously in the notepad for the product search and create bugs for at least this scenario. And then maybe if we have time, we will also cover this one. So who wants to create with me in the live chat can write down what you want me to write as a summary or title for the bug first for this issue. So searching for a product using the search bar does not yield any results, even when the product exists in the inventory. So you can write in the live chat if you want a summary or a title that we can write down for our bug for this. I see some people are typing. I'll wait a bit more. So what title would we select for this? It's actually better if I highlight it, maybe. Okay. I see Daniel wrote finding a bug. Yeah, so essentially, okay, I see Steven wrote as well, Jixing as well. Search bar does not return any value in product clues. That's a very, very good summary title, actually. Jixing, no results show after searching for a product using the search bar. That's also a good way to go about it. I'm gonna copy the one that Steven sent, just due to timing, but I mean both and the both Jixing and Suzanne, yours work search bar not showing results, so all of those are relevant titles that we can actually implement. I'm just gonna use the first one for the time being, and we see now I don't have the title, I just have this little dash, let's say. You can just click on the title here and you can paste or enter whichever thing you need to. So it's very easy to modify anything that you have entered already in this ticket. Now let's go for the description. Um, Now, who would want to help me write down the subscription for the same? So if we read about this, searching for a product using the search bar does not yield any results, even when the product exists in the inventory. What can we use for description here? What do you think that is the best description we could fit for this ticket? I see somebody's typing again. So let's see what we get for the description. Remember, you can always reuse something. When the user searches for a product on the search bar, no results are shown. Yep, that's a pretty good description. I can copy that one. So I'm just going to open the here. I'm going to write when the user search for product on the search bar, no results are shown. One thing we notice here is even when product exists in the inventory. So what we can do is when the user search for a product that exists in inventory, on the search bar, no results are shown. So it's important to highlight this bit because this, if it exists, it should be shown. So we want to make sure when we search for this product that exists, we want to see it. So when the user searches for a product that exists in inventory on the search bar, no results are shown. That's fantastic. And then we can again write down steps to replicate and what would be the steps to do this. So who would want to write down some of the steps now? So what would be the first thing that we can do here? Maybe I can first write down the simplest step and be say navigate to the, let's just check the name of the page. So it was product search page, product search page. So what would be the next approach or the next step? Enter existing product name. Wonderful. Yeah, that's fantastic, Susan. Enter existing product name. Type product in search bar. Yep, that's also very good, Steven. Either of those could work. So we're gonna write this. Okay. What would be the next step? I think we need one or two done. Okay. Wonderful. Observe is correct. However, an even better approach is to add what Stephen mentioned, which is click on search icon. It's a very good test step because we obviously need to search somehow. So just entering the term does not do the search, right? So when we do this, we can actually filter for the result, and then comes observe. Another thing you can also do sometimes is you can click on search icon and add an alternative. So you can also order this, select the enter key. So depending when you search for a term, right, you can use enter, you can use the search icon. So you can usually implement both, because sometimes uh, it could work different ways, especially when you work mobile. So when you select enter on mobile, it can sometimes transfer what you're trying to enter in another field. So just as a friendly tip. All right, we have everything we need from the steps here. So we're going to write expected result and then actual result. So that's wonderful, Francesco. Yeah, exactly. So you can use the enter for the search as well. So what were we expecting to happen when we search for this term? What is our expected result? I see plenty of people typing, so I'll give it a bit more time. Yeah, search term yields correct product result. Fantastic. Search product should be listed as expected. Wonderful. Yeah, both are very good approaches. I'm going to use Venus result here just to make sure that everybody has a bit of input into this total result. So search product should be listed as expected. So we should see it when we try to essentially search for that item. Should be listed as expected, and then the actual result we can actually say, for example, let me just for the actual result we can just simply say the existing search product does not appear. So we know that it does exist in inventory, and when we search it, it does not appear. So essentially, um, that's basically it, what we would need from this. And my final question for now, for all of you, because I only created this by default, is for the priority. So how would you categorize this issue? Currently, it stays medium. This is by default. So what do you think? Should we put it higher, lower? So again, we're searching for something that exists in the search functionality and it doesn't appear. Okay, I see Jixing and Francesco writing high. Okay. I'm going to list the options actually here so you can see them as well. So uh, maybe that will provide different opinion. High, yep. Okay, I see mostly high. I would even classify uh, because it costs the company money. High, yeah, correct. All right. I would even say high is okay. High is definitely correct. Again, some are just high, low, and medium, so I understand this. Especially when we work in Jira, we want to put the highest priority. And why is the highest priority for this? So the base functionalities of the search should be, if something exists and I search for it, I should be able to see it. Vice versa, if I enter something completely random, I should not see anything. So if I just enter, let's say, an array of strings, which are all random, I should not see anything. So this is the base search functionality. So this will definitely be of the highest priority. So I want to make sure when somebody searches for something that we have, they should be able to see it. So that is why I would put it at highest. But I also agree with high. If it's only low, medium, high, definitely high is the best you can do. So I would go for that as well. Okay. I think that is basically it for the Jira. Do you have any questions regarding this? I agree with the highest. I think if Amazon search did not yield any results, that would be a disaster. Yep, correct. Yep. Yeah, and I would one thing I wanted to add, if you don't have any specific questions, while you have the Jira, you can explore something, and I will show you right now. You can go into the apps here. If you go into the apps folder, there should be an option to add apps. Let me see, was it here or was it here? You can do manage apps, I think. And Zephyr. No, it doesn't. Okay, I'll write the steps later. But essentially, what you can do is you can install plugins in Jira, so you can use the apps that Jira provides. And one of those apps is Zephyr. Zephyr is similar to TestRail, but it's built in Jira, so you can create the test cases like I have here. And the good thing about them is if I open one of them, you can see that you have traceability and you can actually link them to other issues. Uh, so what you can do if you want, if you have time, because the trial I think is 13, 14 days, you can install it in the applications. You can install X-Ray as well, so whichever you want to check out, and you can play around with creating some test steps, some test cases, linking them. So you see we have options to add existing issues, create new issues. I already linked it to this issue. If we open this one, we see that Zephyr is noted here. So this is one way where you can do where we can do traceability. But yeah, so essentially you can, if you wish to play around a bit with this, it is a very handy tool. It's widely used, so I highly recommend while you have the free trial to explore this option as well. It definitely supports your learning a lot, and it's quite different from other tools. All right. I think that that is more or less everything from my side. So if there are no questions, thank you all for the attention, and yeah,